And so first, to start off, for those of you that may not know me, my name is Jason Van Sickle. I'm a local real estate developer. I actually grew up in Wichita. I was the son of an architect and a nurse here in town, and my dad was just an intern architect when he got started, and was actually CEO of one of the largest architectural firms here in town and in the state of Kansas. So very proud of that legacy. Very proud of the fact that both my parents went and got college educations, which inspired me even after I had kind of a rough start of starting school and getting married and having kids young and going through a divorce and being a single parent for a while, which postponed my eventual getting a degree. I had mentors in the form of parents, in the form of grandparents, in the form of friends that taught me from a very early age the power of education and the importance of education if I wanted to have opportunities in life. And so as we talk a little bit about this project, I want you to understand that that's what this is about. Spero House isn't just a housing project for people from low-income backgrounds. Spero House is a testament to the transformative power of education. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through this presentation. So just a very little bit about me for those, again, that don't know me. I graduated from Wichita State University with an undergraduate degree in philosophy and a minor in math, which to me I thought were very empowering because I wanted to learn how to think. I think it probably made my parents a little nervous that I was racking up debt and getting degrees like philosophy. And then I went on and got a master's degree in sociology, which again isn't very marketable unless you're planning on going to get your PhD. But I think that my career is becoming a testament to it actually can be marketable, because what I learned was that the power of research, the power of analysis, the power of statistics to prove what works and what doesn't work. And that's what I've taken into the real estate world. When I graduated, I first went to work for the Martin's companies here in town doing commercial appraisal, because I saw the real estate industry as a place that had a lot of financial opportunity. And I wanted financial opportunity not because I wanted to become wealthy for the sake of having wealth. I wanted financial opportunity because I wanted stability. I wanted freedom. I wanted the ability to have resources to do something with those resources and make an impact in the world. I was tired of seeing people amass wealth for the sake of personal indulgence and for the sake of feeding their ego and not using that wealth to make a difference in the world. So it became my mission to figure out how I could go into the business world and become successful, utilize the education that I had to build that success, from that success create the resources, not just financial, but network-wise, intellectually, to figure out how to make a change in this world. And so after Martin's, I went and helped build the research and analysis department for Jack DeBoer. He was starting a company called Value Place Hotels. Helped build that from the ground up, figuring out how to put together financial plans and business plans. Then I went to the WSU Center for Real Estate and started their research and analysis department. Stan Longhofer, the director, asked me to help write a business plan and create a research staff and figure out how to grow that department at the university. Then from there I went out on my own and I started doing consulting to pay my own bills. And I met a guy named Dave Burke. And Dave Burke's done a lot to create this area down here that we call Old Town. And in 2009, he had the original Wichita High School under contract and wanted to turn it into apartments. But that's what you refer to in real estate development as speculative development, because you're taking a building that's never proven itself as apartments and you're saying, I'm going to turn it into apartments. And when you're doing that in 2009, when the housing bubble just burst and the bailouts are flowing and banks are under mandates from the federal government not to do a single risky loan, even if you're Dave Burke with all of his success that he's proven down here, it was nearly impossible to get that project off the ground. So I told Dave, hey, I've got a background in financing projects like this. I know how to make it work. I'll come and work with you for free without any expectations of anything other than to learn how to put a project like this together. And he said, let's do it. And we got that project financed, and we got that project open, and it became the fastest, it became the property that, the apartment complex that leased up fastest in downtown history, and has gone on to be an incredible success. After that, I decided I wanted to create my own housing development model. And so I went to work figuring out how to do development on my own. And the result of that was an apartment project that just recently opened at K96 in Oliver. If you've been down K96 and seen all these buildings being built out there, that's our 216-unit apartment complex, which just finishes. It's finishing its final phases this month. It's half open and will be fully open at the end of the month, and it's leasing up faster than the one downtown. So we've had a lot of great lessons as a company that we've learned. I've gone from a one-man show with the help of my kids occasionally in the office to having, as of yesterday, 11 employees, and we now have a prototype for rural rental housing. Because as I got that project done at K96 in Oliver, I thought, man, we've got an exciting model for apartments. We do these beautiful apartments that are upper income stuff, fancy stuff, really neat. But I realized I was just creating more of the same. I wasn't really solving any problems. And around that time, Matt Jordan, who's been a friend of mine for many years, started introducing me to city managers and other folks in rural communities, and opening my eyes to the fact that these smaller towns had a desperate need for quality housing. And so about a year ago, with about a dozen projects with approximately $160 million in total value in 4 different cities, including Wichita, Kansas City, Topeka, Tulsa, I shut down our high-end apartment initiatives and said, we're going to solve the problem. We're going to solve the problem of rural communities needing housing. And so I went to work with my staff over the last year, learning about and looking at a bunch of different concepts for apartment development. And about a month and a half ago, we finished a prototype which will work in any market, any rural community. And I say work, the reason people don't build apartments in rural communities is because the rent rates are 20–30% lower, construction costs are 20% higher. And so right out of the gate, you've got a big challenge compared to these bigger markets. So people in Wichita, there's local developers, regional developers, national developers that'll come and do apartment projects one at a time. These small towns, they haven't had anything built for the last 30 years. And what has been built has been low-income housing, subsidized properties. And one mandate that I have for myself and my company and all the companies that we start is that we will not ask for government subsidies to make our projects work. Our government has enough problems. We have enough debt. We have enough challenges we're going to have to face as a country in terms of getting financially in a good and solid place. The last thing we need are more business folks and developers coming and saying, you need to give me money if you want me to help solve your problems in your community. What needs to happen is more public-private partnerships that figure out how to solve problems. Private business doing its part, building the financial models based upon their own merits, and working with local communities only to the extent that the local communities provide the guidance to say, here's what we need. We'll make the introductions. We'll help you figure out what needs to go where, but we need you to step up as private industry to figure out the models. And that's what we did with the rural rental housing model. And our model is such a great model that I was introduced recently to the director for Kansas of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture has an incredible stake in these rural communities, and so they have housing initiatives, and they're very focused on figuring out how to make sure that the housing supply in these communities creates a good availability for growing the workforce and providing for the people that are already there. And when the director for Kansas of the U.S. Department of Agriculture heard about our prototype, she that same day got on the phone and organized a statewide conference at the Kansas Leadership Center for rural community leaders to come here in December, not just to talk about our model, but to talk about real solutions for rural communities, but also to see our model and to see how we've been able to solve that problem. And that's what we're really hard at work on. I'm telling you all that because once we had this rural model, because of the lower income and the higher costs, I sat down one day and I said to myself, I need to figure out where our break-even point is. How low can our rents go before we risk losing money, before we get into financial trouble? So, as I often do, I opened up an Excel spreadsheet and started plugging in numbers, and I figured out that in our one-bedroom apartments, a single parent earning only $7.25 an hour and working 40 hours a week could afford our apartment and spend only 30% of their income, and we would not lose money. I figured out that a couple working a combined 60 hours a week and earning only $7.25 a piece minimum wage, could only spend a third of their income and afford our 2-bedroom apartment. Then I realized I've got a low-income housing project. I've got an initiative that can help the lowest paid people in our society have a nice, clean, safe place to live. The problem is I didn't want to have anything to do with low-income housing at all, because I think historically it's been a horrible idea. And I'm not going to pull any punches about this, because historically low-income houses is simply taking people out of a poor community, put them in a little bit better community, and then walked away. Real estate developers have gotten incentives for low-income housing. They stick it in their pocket, they walk away. The housing does no good. Displacing people and putting them under a different roof, even if it's a little nicer, does no good. That doesn't empower people. That doesn't change people. That doesn't make them better. So I have never wanted to get into low-income housing. But then I remembered a conversation I had 5 years ago. It was November 3rd, 2008. And I'm not savant in remembering dates. I just actually have a Word document on my computer where I took notes during this conversation. November 3rd, 2008, I called a friend of mine, Dean Nelson. Dean Nelson runs Discovery Place, which is one of Wichita's kind of crown jewels of early childhood education. She started with nothing. When independent school first got started, she went to the school and said, hey, my children are coming here. I think you need a preschool program. I think you not only need a preschool program, I think you need an early childhood education program. This was at the forefront before there really was early childhood education. It was about doing something with the kids in their ages 0 through 5 so the parents could go to work. And Dean said, I got this idea. There's this Italian philosophy for how to raise kids and get them creatively interactive with their environment and to nurture them and to grow them both creativity-wise and intellectual. And so she created this Discovery Place. And I encourage you to find out more about that great organization. But the point here today is that I called Dean and I said, and this is 5 years ago, I was just getting my feet wet with ideas of development but hadn't done anything on development-wise. I said, I saw an apartment complex the other day. And it was in a lower income neighborhood. And it had this kind of room in it. And it got me thinking, why couldn't somebody do low-income housing and then put a daycare center in that apartment complex so that the parents could leave their children there, so that their children didn't have to be taken across town and dropped off in the basement of somebody's house who may or may not be licensed to watch that child because that's the only thing they can afford? Why can't those children play with their neighbors during the day and stay in their community and be watched so the parents can go to work and earn a living with the psychological comfort of knowing that their parents are in a good place, their children are in a good place? And Dean and I talked about that, and Dean actually introduced me to a woman, Janice, who runs the Opportunity Project, which is a great child program here in town. And we had kicked around some ideas, but I didn't know what the heck I was doing, so I never got the real estate piece off the ground. Fast forward to a few months ago, and I'm sitting here looking at this model, this financially feasible model for low-income housing. 4 buildings that create this square and the Central Park theme. This is our rural prototype. And I'm thinking, what if we put a school there? What if we put a facility there for children? Now it's not just low-income housing where you're displacing people. Now it's a program where you're intervening in their lives. Now it's a program where you're going to step in and say, we're going to give you a better place to live. Is that mine or yours?
Sorry.
No, that's not mine.
It's my alarm.
Hey, that's okay. You got to have that alarm because she's got to be at school here soon because, as we were talking about earlier, you're 5 minutes late, the students are gone.
That's true.
I used to be one of those students. So that is the lead up to what Spero House is about. So let's take a look now at what the design of Spero House is in more detail. Bear with me. I am a first-time user of a laser pointer. So I bought this last night. Very excited. Okay, so this is Spero House. Spero House is a community of 96 apartments. They're 1 and 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom for single parents, 2 bedrooms for single parents with more than one child, or two-parent families, all low income. The other things, Renee and I are trying to work out our signals. I'm supposed to signal her clearly when we move on and clearly when we stop. And I start to raise my hand and she doesn't know what to do. So, Spero House is, the key about Spero House is that it's not a housing project though. This is the school. This is the heart and soul of Spero House. This is the community center. This is the heart and soul of Spero House. This is what it's all about. First of all, when people come to be a part of this, when people come to move in and they come to be a part of the social community, the family at Spero House, they're applying to get into this. They're applying for their infant age child to get accepted into an early childhood education program. The apartment comes with it. The education's free. They have to utilize a third of their income to pay for the housing because we want them to be invested in this process, but we don't want to bankrupt them in the process of getting this leg up in life. So this kind of just will give us an overview of what the property looks like. You've got the front door of the education facility and the community building here. We've got these 4 apartment buildings in the education center which are framing in the central park area here with playground areas, with a lot of green space. This green space is meant not only for a place for families to spend time and for children to play, but we're 100% pet friendly in the way our apartments are designed because we believe in that ability to interact with other forms of life and the therapeutic value of that. This is the back of the Education Community Center. So again, this is just kind of giving you an overview of what the property would look like from different perspectives. These are 3-story apartment buildings, so there's 8 units per floor and 24 units per building. So that's how they're basically laid out. So this is a typical 2-bedroom unit. This is important because we tried to be incredibly innovative on figuring out how to make a comfortable living environment, but it's not supposed to be where the families spend the majority of their time. We want to get them out of those living units, into the park to interact, into the education center to spend time and get tutoring, into the education/community center to go for potluck dinners and to interact with their fellow neighbors. So these aren't supposed to be big living units where people spend most of their time. This is a place where they go where they want to spend time as a family. This is a place where they go to sleep. These are going to be busy families out in the community. So the main thing is to provide as much as we can for as many people as we can. So a 2-bedroom unit here has a couple bedrooms. If this was a family where it had a 2-parent family structure and 2 kids, this would be good because you'd have the parents probably in the smaller bedroom here. And this is big enough to put a couple double beds in, so you can comfortably have a family of 4. If it was a slightly larger family and we just desperately wanted to get them in the program and didn't want to restrict their ability to be in the program because of the number of children that they have, we can expand this so that you can have a couple double beds or even a couple bunk beds, additional bedrooms here for kids, and then, that's one. And then you've got a Murphy bed in the living room for the parent or parents. So we can really get a higher density in if we need to, because again, this is about applying for the education program, and we don't want to limit somebody's ability to get their children in the education program and be a part of Spero House simply because they have too large of a family. This is the view of the inside, and just to show you, these are nice apartments. I mean, these are nice wood cabinets, nice countertops. They've got all the things that you need. Some of the things that we take for granted, like a dishwasher, which a lot of low-income housing does not have. These are nice. This is a perspective here at the other end with the Murphy bed, which is actually kind of a console that has a TV mounted on it. So if you're not using it, it doesn't look awkward. It just looks like the place where the TV is supposed to go. So again, here is the overview of the community. From a real estate development standpoint, we really thought this out. The parking's around the outside. We don't know where the site's going to be, although we're looking at some potential options. we want to have this around the outside because as a real estate developer, you want to buffer something like an apartment development from the surrounding uses. But again, this central courtyard area is one of the key features of the project. So let's take a closer look at the education center. Starting out with the first floor. The way the education center is structured is that the first floor is the Early Childhood Education Center. And this is going to be a world-class early childhood education center. And one of the things that I want to mention, especially since this meeting is largely focused on having a broadened discussion with educators, especially at our local universities, is that this isn't just going to be an education center that helps 96 0 through 5-year-olds at a time to get a strong emotional, psychological, and intellectual foundation for later in life. Although that would be enough to be saying you're doing something great. Because one of the things I've learned as I've interacted with early childhood education professors is the fact that it is incredibly important to capture those children, especially those in high-risk environments like low-income families, capture them from day one of their life and put them in a safe and nurturing environment. Most of us, if not all of us in this room, had nurturing parents, came from a good background, so we take for granted that we see the world as a fairly safe place where we can go out and try to accomplish things. If you come from an unstable background, a poor background, where there's a lot of chaos and stress from day one, you don't have that sense of security. You don't have that sense of confidence and empowerment. What we're going to do is we're going to change that. We're going to intervene. We're going to intervene in a big, important way because these are families. Low-income families have an intergenerational, multi-generational history of poverty. And it's not going to end unless something dramatic comes in and breaks that chain. Unless something comes in and takes the young child and says to them, your future can be bright, you're good, you're smart, the world's a place where you can go and you can flourish and you can do great things. And so this early childhood education center, okay, so the early childhood education center is about that. But more importantly, it's about having good education partners like Wichita State University, Friends University, Newman University, because this is going to be a laboratory. This is going to be where educators go, take the best and brightest ideas in education, apply them for the benefit of these children, see what works. When something does work, publish papers, have conversations, disseminate that information out to the rest of the education community, because this is a place where we can experiment with great ideas, and when they're proven to be right, we can compile that research and analysis, show those statistics, prove those correlations, and then say to the rest of the world, this is what works, so that that can be passed on for other people's use. So to look at the details of the Early Childhood Education Center, what we've got here is, this is the main parking lot area, but this is actually the main area you will enter the center from, because this is the park area back here. But we'll start here at the front of the building. You've got this entry area, you come in, and this is a secure area, so you need to have somebody buzz you in or some type of access into the building. We don't expect problems, but I've been involved with the Wichita Children's Home for many years, and so I know that when you come from poor backgrounds or unstable family, you don't know what's going to happen. There's divorced parents who have conflict, there's boyfriends, girlfriends, there's things that happen. So you don't want anybody coming in, interacting with these children that's not authorized to, so it's a safe facility. You come in, and this is kind of what we refer to as the main street of the building. Each of these rooms has kind of a different color scheme to it, so the child can immediately identify, there's my room, and in the morning know exactly where they're going and which part of the building is their home. This area over in here is the infant through toddler area, 0 through 2 or 2.5. How these rooms are individually configured will be to meet the needs of our population at any given time. We've got one configuration here that has some cribs and things like that for the really young infant children. And then these are for the toddlers, once they can walk, and then on through age 2 to 2.5. Over here you have the preschool area, which is an area where you have all of the things you need for preschool, the art and the education and all of those things. Here's a perspective of one of those preschool areas. Typical preschool area, you got tables, you've got easels for art projects. You've also got a lot of white, clean wall space because these are blank canvases. This is where you highlight the children's artwork. You highlight what the children do and have them see that they can create things and do things. This is a perspective from the outside. One of the key things, and we'll look a little bit more about this, is that when the parents come bring their children to this facility in the morning, they don't go through the front door, they don't even go through the back door and into that hallway because that would create chaos. That would create 96 families trying to get into this hallway and get their children into the space they need to go. So what we created was front porch areas for these different classrooms. So these classrooms are more like one-room schoolhouses where you go and you meet your teacher who's at the door to greet the parents and talk about the day ahead and talk about what the child did yesterday, or the parent tells the teacher, you know, what the child had a rough night or has been feeling sick, and have that parent-teacher interaction. Parents have a little time there outside before their child goes in to interact and to spend a little bit more time with their child before they go into the classroom. And so you can again see here that this is where they'll be able to come down these sidewalks, drop off. One thing I forgot to mention when we were looking at this perspective earlier, this is a really cool feature. I'll give Renee credit for doing that. And this is Renee, she's my architect. These black lines right here are chalkboards, so that kids can do handprints and draw things. This is spaces where we want them to be interacting with their environment. And so again, taking a look at this, here's where you live, here's the education center. Let's think about this for a minute. These are families who in the morning used to get up under the stress of trying to figure out their bills the night before, living in poor circumstances physically, hustling to get their children ready for the day, figuring out how to drive across the town or take a bus across the city to drop their kids off at a poor daycare facility or somebody's house, and then under all that stress try to get to work and put on a good face for a good day's work so they can pay their bills. That was their previous circumstances. This is what they'll be moving into. They'll be moving into a nice apartment, a beautiful living space, a safe environment. They'll be taking a walk through a park in the morning with their children to the front door of a high-quality educational facility. That is a tremendous difference. That is a weight off of their shoulders. That's a transformative change in their lifestyle, which is incredibly important because, as Mike sent me a study recently about the impact of poverty on the brains of adults. And I'm not talking about the physical structure of the brain changing. I'm just talking about we've got a limited amount of RAM. We've got a limited amount of resources we can dedicate to the challenges of daily life. And if you wake up and you're already facing the challenge of figuring out how to go through the stress of getting your child to school so you can get to work, so you can make minimum wage, so you can barely get by, if get by at all, and now you can focus on your kids. Now those stresses are relieved so that you can relax. Have exchanges with your kid instead of being stressed and having those as triggers for anger and even violence. That's one of the key things about this. This is the second floor. This started out as a testing and tutoring center. It's 9 o'clock. If anybody needs to go, feel free to go. And I'm going to accelerate a little bit so we've got time for questions. This was first going to be a K-12 testing and tutoring center because we don't want to leave anybody out of this program if they get their infant child into the early childhood education program and that family has siblings, and they're going to have siblings. And so we needed a place to interact with the older children that come along with the younger children that get into the early childhood education program. So this started out to be a K-12 testing and tutoring center for after school for those kids. But it's evolved into something more. I personally grew up in public schools, so did my kids until the last 3 or 4 years. Then they went out to independent school, just a difficult choice I had to make about where I wanted my kids to go to get a good education. My daughter was at independent school, doing very well, had good friends, had a good social environment. But what I learned, because I'd never been through it, is that there's a little drama associated with being a teenage girl. Who knew? And again, she was one of the ones that had the great opportunity to have good friends and have a good environment. But my point is she decided to try something different. And so we found out USD 259 has an online program, completely online, curriculum from K through 12. You don't have to step foot in a classroom. It's the equivalent of a homeschool program online. And so she opted to come to my office every day and do her school from there. She didn't know it. She also volunteered to start working for like companies. But we found out that that's a great program and it works. And so we decided, why can't this be a K through 12 facility? Why can't our families decide to either send their kids to the local school or stay here in the safety of this property and do online education with the oversight of mentors and tutors. We're going to be working with USD 259 to get this approved as a satellite testing and tutoring center for their online program. And it's really cool because it's also a different way of doing K through 12 education. One of the cool things about the online program is it's got a dashboard. So in each of your classes, when you're doing well, you're in the green. When you start to fall behind, you're in the yellow. When you're really behind, you're in the red. I don't want to see anything in the red. My daughter's back there. And so that gives us the opportunity to do education different. Do education the way it was when I was in elementary school, because I went to one of the city's first alternative schools. It was called Isley. And they had this very unique approach where it wasn't just lectures and do this and do that and here's your homework. It was, you got a contract at the beginning of the week of all the things you had to achieve by Friday, more like the real world. When you achieved them, they had a lounge you could go hang out in. It was a reward-based system. We've got this similar thing here. What you do is, this is a lounge area here where kids can hang out and talk and visit and relax. This up here is a cafe where you can get tickets to get food and drinks when you've done well and you're in the green. This is a terrace area where you can go sit outside with your iPad or your laptop and do a little workout there. Rewards that you get for working hard and pushing forward. And then we've got all the things that you need to be a good education facility. First of all, we've got restrooms, important, water fountains. But then we've also got these areas here where kids can sit together as a group. If a couple kids just want to talk about something, they can sit together. We've got these tables here where a teacher can sit with several students and tutor them and talk to them. We've got private rooms over here where you can go do one-on-one. And we've got this private, this quiet area, which I think is very important with cubicles, because that's where you can go and just get away and focus and get your work done. So here's a perspective from the inside, looking kind of from one end to the other. You've got your cubicles. This is kind of the lounge area here. There's a loft, a really cool space. You kind of get above everybody. This is a space you're only going into if you're in the green. Looking at it from the other end, one of the things that we see is all the shelves are 3.5 feet tall. Anything taller than that, you can see through, because this needs to be an open space where you always have a limited number of teachers and tutors compared to the number of students. So you want people to be able to see and know what's going on with everybody at any given time. And then again, just the way this all lays out, we can go on from there. Now we got the basement. This is the last piece of the education facility. One of the things that we need to have is a space for kids to go run around in if the weather's bad outside. These parents are going to be working from 8 till at least 5 or 6 at night. The education piece will take part from the beginning of the day towards mid to late afternoon, but after that you need to transition into something else. You need to transition into playtime, into social time. Usually that'll be outside in the Central Park area and in the playgrounds, but when the weather's bad, we don't want them sitting at their desks and back inside. So we created this basement area where you've got a place, a gymnasium for kids to run around, throw balls, do things, and run off some of that energy at the end of the day. It's Kansas, so we also want a tornado shelter. And so that's what this is as well. This is big enough to take all the families and all their kids to if we have bad weather so that they can feel safe and secure there. This is also a community space. We've got a room right here where we can keep enough tables to be able to put 200 people comfortably seated at tables for events. Those can be potluck dinners. Those can be social times together. Those can be anything that we can think of to bring these community of individuals together to get to know each other and to interact. So this is the outside area. Again, this is the Central Park and the place where the kids would usually play if the weather's good. It's the place where families will go during the evenings and weekends to spend time. That's it? Okay. That's Spero House.
Where did the name come from?
God, you should be a plant that has good questions. First of all, let me say thank you to a few key individuals. Matt, thanks for coming from the Kansas Leadership Center. Matt's been a part of helping push this forward. Mike's helped organize people from Newman University. Greg's helped organize people from WSU. Dan's helped organize people from Friends. So I want to say thanks to all of you. Janet, who's incognito over here, I want to say thanks to her. She's got the tough job of getting elected to something as a member of our city council. So I'm going to shamelessly take a moment to say Janet's one of the hardest working people I know on the council. She is the only person that showed up at every single event that I've done that's had some type of meeting, even when I was nobody. She was there at the groundbreaking and gave a speech as the vice mayor of K96 and Oliver. She was there when, as a representative of the Old Town Association, I formed a task force to figure out how to create an overlay to get rid of some of the problems we have that are plaguing Old Town, and she's here today. So thank you, Janet, for being here. Now I'll answer your question. And quit calling me Jeff, that's my dad.
Yeah, that's right.
Spero House. The name Spero is Latin for hope.
Sweet.
And that's what this is. This is hope. This is hope just not to transform the lives of 96 families and their children, 96 families at a time, although that would be enough. This is the hope of figuring out what works better in early childhood education and K through 12 education. And we also have a saying, Dum Spero, Spero, which is while I breathe, I hope. And so that's where that comes from. Now,
so what's the role of the universities? How could folks get involved?
good question. First of all, I'm not asking anybody for money. That's the good news. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not asking your institutions for money. I know how to do this. This is a $9 million project. The housing, $7 million. The education facilities, $2 million. I've got a model that takes care of the housing, so now we're down to $2 million. And I've had a lot bigger challenges than this when I did the apartments downtown or did the apartments at K96 and Oliver. I can get this built. I'm not asking for money. What I'm asking for is passionate education partners. If I build this facility, I need people who care about education, who want to see advancement in education, who want to test ideas in education, whether you work in healthcare, whether you work in sociology, psychology, whether you work in social work, whether you work in family therapy. I want you to come in and work with us in this facility. I'm going to build you a research facility where you can test out great ideas, where you can disseminate those ideas. I like something Dan said in a meeting we had a while back, which is how incredible it would be, how incredible it would be to have this facility and have a graduate student from Friends and Newman and WSU working together, co-publishing papers that go out into the world and show statistics and show the research and analysis to say, this is what works. We had a great meeting last night at Newman with early childhood education folks and people from the community, and I had somebody come up to me afterwards and say, I don't know how we got on the subject, but we got on the subject of politics. It seems to come up a lot these days. And he said, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm tired of waiting for the federal government to quit arguing with each other. I'm tired of waiting for them to do something. I said, let them do what they're doing. Let's do something else. Let's make it our responsibility. Let's not wait for the federal government to define what makes good education. Let's not wait for the public schools to say, what are you going to let us do? Let's go out and let's prove the research. Let's show what works, and then let's tell the world about it. That's what I'm asking from you. I'm asking you to be my education partner. I'm asking you to help me figure out what a great facility for experimentation and research and analysis in educational theory and educational practice should be. And then we're going to go test it. We're going to go find real and meaningful solutions and ideas to improve the quality of education. Any other questions? 9:15. A little time to,
I was just wondering if there had been any discussion or vision for adult education.
God, you should be a plant too. Yes. Evenings and weekends, the education facility becomes an adult education facility. We were going to look at job training. We take for granted the fact that we understand that we've got this great internet as a resource to learn. We take for granted that people know how to utilize the internet. We take for granted that people know how to type. We take for granted that people are literate. This is going to be an adult education program on the evening and weekends. If you need literacy help, you're going to get it. If you want to figure out how to get your GED, we're going to help give you guidance. You're in poverty because you didn't have those mentors. Like I said at the beginning, you didn't have parents or people who had education and knew how to do it and could show you how and could give you advice and guidance when you need it. We're going to step in and give it to them. We're going to show up. We're going to show up not just for the kids, we're going to show up for the adults. We're going to show them how they can get a better life. And anything they have along the way where they've got questions or confusions, we're going to give them guidance. So it's going to be the adults too.
Jason, would you say the sort of next big hurdle is trying to find acreage to be able to build this in?
I would have a week or two ago or a month or so ago, but we're having conversations already. I've talked to only one person in this town who's a major landowner, and in that first conversation, he said he's considered looking at his portfolio to come up with the 5 acres we need. One conversation. Again, raising money, figuring out how to get real estate projects to the finish line, that's what I've been working on the last 10 years. I'm not worried about that piece. I'm not worried about finding a site. I do want your input, though, as to where it should be.
District 6! Oh. Excuse me.
We're going to have a meeting soon, and you can help me find a piece of land in District 6.
Yeah, I got one in mind already.
5 acres is enough. And 5 acres, especially when somebody can write that off as somebody that owns it and invests it, and then have all this amazing, wonderful things they're doing with it as well. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I might have said that was the next big hurdle. I don't think it's a hurdle now. So,
Jason, I just want to say that even the issue of our 3 schools being partners together could be something you see as the next step, or could be something you see as a challenge.
yeah.
Although I'd want to say, Greg and Mike and I 3 years ago, in the fall of 2010, spent that fall in 2010 talking about how we could step out of those ruts of schools being only competitive with each other, or professions even being only competitive with each other, and really work toward a common project. And that resulted then in the summer of 2011 with the Strengthening Kansas Family event, which was just a great experience. It about killed us, but I mean it was a great experience. So I'm confident that this kind of collaboration can occur to the benefit not only the people that would be served in Spero House, but even to the students that we train in our respective programs.
And what Dan is saying is it took something that started with 3 of us believing in it and grew, and it was a project that we could work on. And honestly, we didn't. Hope there's no administrators too powerfully. We didn't. I mean, we didn't deal with a lot of administrative stuff. We just didn't. We didn't violate any rules or anything, and we asked when we needed something, but we just didn't. And I think it's one of the reasons, one of the things that we talked about the first time we met is, hey, let's get started with a small group of people that care, and then start growing it, because that worked so well last time.
It did. And really the credit went to Mike for Mike's real initiative and just quiet, gentle way of just roping people into the most inspiring of projects. So I just have to. So I want to say there's really no component of what you're talking about that is out of reach.
Yeah.
It's not out of reach.
And I'll tell you that, again, I'm glad to have Matt here from Kansas Leadership Center, because we were talking, Kansas Leadership's about, the center's about bringing people together and figuring out how to work to get these organizations with different ideas and different agendas to work together towards a common good and a common